Thank you. Becca really wanted to hit record on this one. Hello friends, welcome back. This is video, it's number 6 or 7 in the Year in a Bible series, and it's been going really well. So this is Deuteronomy. I've just finished Deuteronomy, and things have gone really well. I've now taken 2 trips this year on airplanes. So to New Orleans, I shared about that in the last video. I think the last video, yeah. And then now I've been to Albuquerque, New Mexico and back, having the Bible with me. It's been holding up really well. And, getting into that rhythm of reading while traveling, I was reading on an airplane, actually, kind of hoping that it would spark some conversation with people around me, and it didn't. So, but it was really good. New Mexico, by the way, I went to record some new music, and I know if you read my bio on here, you see that I'm a musician, but I haven't really put out a lot of new music recently, and I'm making new music again, so I'm going to be sharing more about that soon. But as far as the year in the Bible goes, I finished Deuteronomy, the end of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, this like huge important part in the history of the Bible and the history of the Jewish faith, and Jesus and his contemporaries really focusing on these 5 books of the Bible. And Deuteronomy was just a really cool read. I mean, essentially Deuteronomy is like one big speech from Moses. And I don't know why, but I think until I went to seminary, I just never really thought about Deuteronomy very much. But then in seminary, you realize how much of the rest of the Old Testament is kind of referencing back to it, and you're seeing it come up time and time again. And now that I've spent the last 10 days or so reading through it, it's like it makes sense. It's like such a theological juggernaut, right, for the people of Israel. And Moses is, in a lot of ways, recapping a lot of what's gone before. There's a lot, we get the 10 Commandments again, we get some of those big moments again, kind of recapped from Moses' perspective. But also we get some of the laws again, but then there's this kind of look forward, which I think is really, really fascinating. And so, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a little bit less of a slog than Leviticus and Numbers, because as much as it's just Moses talking, there's some thematic things going on that are really intriguing and interesting that I just found. I rifled through it. There's a couple days where I just got, part of the reason why I'm ahead in my reading plan is because there's a couple days where I just get into it and I want to keep reading. And if I've got time, I do that. So instead of reading 3 pages, I might read 6 or 7 or 8 pages at one time and really get invested in what's happening. So big picture themes on Deuteronomy are, I wrote a couple things down here, just in addition to this being Moses' big final speech, and we see the death of Moses at the end, who's been our main character since the beginning of Exodus, right? We have these themes of trust and obedience. There's a lot of back and forth with how we need to be obedient to God and trust God, and there's a lot of language. I even here, I'm going to bring my BCam out. I brought this out just to show you. Look at all these times. I just started highlighting every time it said something about remembering God or not forgetting the Lord. I wrote there just big themes. Do not forget, remember. And it just really felt like these were some big themes. Like Moses was going back, hey, I'm not going to be with you anymore. You're moving on without me now. You cannot forget what God has done for you. You have to remember. And then you get, I fold back here over to chapter 6, the Shema, right? Deuteronomy 6, verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone, the Lord is one. You shall, again, here's a little note. The Lord alone, that sounds unfamiliar, but there's a little note down there. So I go back down here. I find in the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So basically the NRSV translators are saying that's a footnote. It can be either one of those things based on how we're reading into this. So anyway, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. It's called the Shema because that Hear, O Israel, that's the first word in the Hebrew, Shema. And so that notice I wrote here, see Mark 12. Well, that's because that's when Jesus takes the Shema and he says, these are the greatest commandments. The Shema added with it, love your neighbor as yourself. So this was deeply important to Jesus, and this is where we get that, this speech from Moses reading to the Israelites. So all this stuff about trust and obedience, about not forgetting God, about remembering God, the Shema, the really important stuff. And then I was just flipping through here this morning. I didn't have as many questions in Deuteronomy, and I think that's because a lot of it is something that we've gone over before in the other books of the Torah, but I had a lot of highlights, a lot of notes, things like that, just noting things that I really thought were interesting. Just right here, there's a section about generosity, which is something I'm trying to really focus on in my life and be generous with other people. But then I put a little thing in here. Oh, no, that's the Shema. Here we go. We get to chapter oh, sorry, that's 34. That's the death of Moses. We get to right before the death of Moses, and God says, I'm trying to find this, y'all, sorry. Check this out. Chapter 31, at the very end of all of this, right, which has been God talking to Moses, don't forget, remember God, don't do anything stupid. Then we get, for I know that they are inclined to do even now, what they are inclined to do even now, before I have brought them into the land that I promised them. God is basically saying, hey, Moses, they're going to rebel. They're going to turn their backs on me. After all of this back and forth in these books of the Bible, God says, I know what my people are going to do. There's a reference to the exile in here, right? There's so much that God's saying, hey, I get it. They're not going to be able to follow all these rules. They're not going to be able to do all this. They're going to struggle. They're going to turn my backs on me. They are going to forget me. They're not going to remember me. Even that's what they say we've been telling them to do this entire time. God knows that they're going to rebel, right? And yet still we know the end of this story. And we know that God is going to be gracious, that God is going to persevere with his people, right? And I just think that that's such an interesting thing, because there's all this language, and then at the very end, God's like, Moses, they're going to screw up. And for God to choose to love them and to choose to take them into this promised land anyway, I think is really, really powerful. And the last thing I just thought here in the death of Moses, I had never really caught this before in any other readings here, but these last words of Deuteronomy, check this out. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. And then you see, obviously, my note, it says, until Jesus. If you read the Gospel of Matthew, right, a lot of people, I've said this before, that Matthew is kind of, he's mapping his story of Jesus over the top of the story of Moses. Matthew clearly sees Jesus as the new Moses, as the one who is surpassing Moses. And right here it says, never again was there someone like this, who had this kind of relationship until Jesus. Jesus surpasses that. So there's just this, right here at the end of the Torah, there's this little nod towards Jesus. And again, these books of the Bible, these 5 books that start the Bible are such an important part of the foundation of everything we believe, everything we know, everything we have, and particularly when it comes to later on when Jesus arrives, and how he interprets the world and how he sees these scriptures, and the way that everything about the way we see all this shifts because and in him. It's just such an important integral section, these 5 books of the Bible. So, yeah, really, really insightful, really, really inspiring to read this in these first couple months of the year. And this is such a huge foundation, and I'm ready now to dive in for this story to kind of unfold even more. And I just look back on Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and think, wow, we've got such a beautiful picture here of God and God's people, and the back and forth, the push, the pull, the greatness, the power, the majesty of God, and the need to fear him and obey him and follow him, to not forget what he's done, right? And that really just challenges me every day of my life, right? To as I read this, to walk through, and I can get so narrowly focused on myself, right? Whatever is going on in my life right here, right now. But I want to always remember what God has done. I never want to forget that. And I think that that's just a really good, inspiring word for here at the end of the Torah, to say, don't forget, keep focused on it. Take these words and ingrain them into your life, into your heart. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm really excited now to turn the page and to go to Joshua. All of this anticipation towards the promised land is about to pay off, and the story is really going to get kicking now. And so I'm really excited about that. I don't know how I'm going to do the videos moving forward, but I'm going to let the text kind of help me decide that as I start to dive in and read. So if you have any questions about Deuteronomy, if you have any questions about my plan, things like that, definitely leave those in the comments. Thank you again to everyone who has commented and said, just been encouraging to me, and those of you who are doing this with me. I think it's been really awesome to kind of dive into this and chat about it together. So if you're struggling with your read through the Bible 1 year plan, don't give up. Remember, it's not about just getting through it, it's about really absorbing it. So maybe you need to slow down and take a little bit more time so you can really invest yourself in the Word. But I want to encourage you guys as well to keep doing that. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being a part of this with me. I'll see you next time.